They say curiosity killed the cat, but in my neighborhood, curiosity almost destroyed a reputation. Imagine this. You wake up before sunrise, coffee still steaming in your hands, and through the pale glow of dawn, you catch your very own HOA president in her lavender bathrobe stealing mail straight from your box. That's not paranoia. That's not gossip. That's what I saw with my own eyes, and from that moment on, nothing in our neighborhood would ever feel safe again. For weeks, I'd felt something was off. It started small, utility bills arriving late, a birthday card from my sister that never showed up, and even the IRS insisting they delivered a form I never received. At first, I blamed the post office. Maybe some careless worker had dropped things along the way. Maybe it was just bad luck, but bad luck doesn't strike with this much precision. No, this was deliberate, and once I noticed the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. That morning, I set a trap, not with locks or cameras, just patience. I brewed my coffee, sat near the window, and waited as the horizon began to turn gold. My hands trembled against the mug, my pulse quickened with every minute. Then I saw movement. A shadow drifting down my driveway. At first I thought it was some random porch pirate, but then I saw her, Karen, our HOA president, slippers scraping the pavement, bathrobe tied loosely at the waist, her pearl earrings swaying like she was headed to some board meeting at dawn. She walked up to my mailbox like she owned it. No hesitation. No shame. She yanked it open, flipped through my letters as if they were hers, and slid one into her robe pocket. I almost choked on my coffee. Karen, the same woman who lectured us all on neighborhood integrity. The same one who handed out violation slips like Halloween candy. Because your lawn was an inch too long, or because your trash can was half a foot out of place. That Karen was stealing my mail. I wanted to fling open the door, storm outside, and demand answers. But my gut told me to stay still. If she was bold enough to do it once, she'd do it again. And if she was targeting me, who else in the neighborhood had she already gone after? That night, I replayed the moment in my head again and again. The lavender robe, the practiced ease, the smugness of her walking away as if she had every right. And the more I thought about it, the more furious I became. This wasn't just some neighborly nuisance. This wasn't about HOA rules or pettiness anymore. This was federal. Mail theft is a crime, a serious one. The very next day, during our HOA meeting, I decided to test her. Casually, I brought up how I'd been missing mail lately. Karen's reaction was chilling. She tilted her head, smiled, and let out this soft laugh. "Oh, you know how unreliable the post office can be," she said, her pearl earrings glinting under the fluorescent lights. The room chuckled with her, but I felt a pit in my stomach, because I knew. She wasn't laughing at the post office. She was laughing at me. In that moment, something inside me hardened. For years, Karen had treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom, bullying, lying, twisting HOA bylaws until people bent under her will. But this time, she crossed a line. This time, she wasn't just bending HOA rules. She was breaking federal law, and she thought she could get away with it. But I wasn't about to let her. What do you do when you know the truth but nobody else believes you? That question haunted me after the HOA meeting. Karen's laugh, that smug little tilt of her head, it echoed in my mind like a dare. She wasn't just stealing mail, she was daring me to stop her. And deep down, I knew if I didn't act soon, she'd keep getting bolder. But how do you fight someone who thrives on power? She wasn't just a neighbor, she was the HOA president. People saw her as untouchable. Complaining to the board would be useless. They were all under her thumb, and confronting her head-on, that would only end in a screaming match and more bogus violation slips stuffed into my mailbox. No, if I wanted to bring Karen down, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof, the kind of proof she couldn't laugh off. So I started documenting everything. Each late bill, each missing letter, each story I heard from neighbors about things lost or delayed. And the picture started to form. This wasn't random, it was systematic. Karen was targeting us, quietly, carefully, always just under the radar. But why? What was she even looking for? That question kept gnawing at me. Was she after money, information, or was this just about control, the thrill of knowing she could reach into our private lives whenever she pleased? The answer didn't matter. What mattered was stopping her. So I called the one group I thought might actually listen. The United States Postal Inspection Service. Most people don't even know they exist, but they do, and they don't take mail theft lightly. The man on the other end of the line was calm, professional. He asked me questions, detailed ones. What time had I seen her? What exactly was missing? Did I have any witnesses? His tone told me something important. He believed me. And when you've been dismissed, mocked, and ignored, belief feels like oxygen. A day later, I met with one of their agents, Inspector Lopez. Square jaw, sharp eyes, the kind of presence that filled the room without him even raising his voice. He listened carefully as I told him everything. And when I finished, he leaned forward, clasped his hands together, and said words I'll never forget. Sir, if what you're describing is accurate, we're dealing with a violation of Title 18, Section 1708. Mail theft, punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison. For the first time, I saw the path forward. Lopez continued, if you're willing to cooperate, we can set up a controlled delivery. We'll bait her with a decoy. All you'll have to do is wait. I didn't hesitate. I agreed. The plan was deceptively simple. They would prepare a letter, ordinary on the outside, but inside it carried a small GPS tracker. The second someone pulled it from my mailbox, they would know. And if Karen pocketed it, there would be no denying the truth. The night before the sting, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with what-ifs. What if she didn't take the bait? What if she suspected something? What if she somehow slipped through the cracks? I kept staring at the ceiling, hearing her laugh, seeing that robe swishing down my driveway. By the time dawn broke, my nerves were shot. I placed the decoy envelope in my mailbox just like they instructed. My hands shook as I shut the lid. Across the street, a nondescript sedan sat parked. Dark windows, engine silent. Inside, the inspectors waited, watching. I retreated to my window, clutching a mug of coffee so tightly I thought it might crack. And then, just as the sun began to rise, I saw her. The lavender bathrobe, the slippers, the confident stride. Karen. She moved briskly like she was out for a morning stroll, but she wasn't waving to neighbors. She wasn't carrying a newspaper. She was making a beeline for my mailbox. My chest tightened as I watched her pull it open, reach inside, and slip the decoy letter into her robe pocket. Then she sauntered off as if nothing had happened. Not 30 seconds later, Lopez's radio crackled. Trackers moving, subject heading northbound. I gripped the edge of my window, my breath caught in my throat. Karen had no idea. She just walked straight into a federal sting. The tracker was moving. The inspector's sedan rolled quietly out of its spot, tailing her at a safe distance. From my window, I could barely breathe. My heart pounded so hard I thought the glass might rattle in its frame. Karen strolled down the sidewalk as if she owned the whole street. And in her mind, maybe she did. Lavender robe brushing against her knees, slippers shuffling, head held high. Not a trace of guilt, not a flicker of fear. She thought she was untouchable. But what she carried in her pocket wasn't just another neighbor's letter. It was bait, government property, and she had no idea the noose was already tightening. I slipped outside, keeping a safe distance, pretending to take out the trash. Across the cul-de-sac, Lopez's car crept forward. Every movement was calculated, silent, surgical. Minutes felt like hours. She walked right up her driveway, pulled her keys from her robe pocket, and disappeared into her house. The GPS dot blinked on Lopez's tablet. Inside, still moving, still intact. Once she opens it, Lopez murmured, we've got her. I nodded, though my throat was too dry to speak. Through my binoculars, I stared at her front windows. Curtains drawn, lights flickering inside. Every second was torture. My stomach twisted as if I were the one under investigation. What if she spotted the tracker? What if she tossed the letter in the trash? What if she denied everything and it turned into another round of her smug smirks and fake smiles? Then Lopez's radio crackled again. Envelope tampered, that's our green light. I felt my knees weaken. This was it, the moment of truth. The inspectors moved fast. Sirens silent, lights flashing only when they turned into her driveway. Doors swung open. Agents in jackets stepped out, badges glinting. Karen opened her front door, clutching the envelope like it was treasure. Her face lit with a strange kind of satisfaction until she noticed the men walking toward her. Lopez stepped forward, voice steady, commanding. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for theft of United States mail. A violation of Title 18, Section 1708. Please place your hands where I can see them." Her face froze. Shock spread across her features like ink spilling on paper. "What, this is a mistake. I'm the HOA president. I have authority." "Authority doesn't extend to stealing mail," Lopez cut her off. His tone had no cracks, no hesitation. Karen's pearl earrings trembled as she turned her head, searching for allies that weren't there. Neighbors were stepping outside now, drawn by the flashing lights. Doors creaked, curtains twitched, phones lifted into the air, recording. And there she was, the queen of the cul-de-sac, standing on her porch in handcuffs. Her voice broke into a whine. "You can't do this to me. I was protecting the neighborhood. I was making sure everything was safe." Lopez didn't even flinch, turn around. The sound of the cuffs clicking shut was louder than thunder. Gasps rippled down the street. A woman who had ruled through fear, fines, and petty threats was now powerless, wrists bound, dignity unraveling in front of everyone. I'll never forget the look in her eyes. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't even guilt. It was disbelief. For years she had pushed people around, twisting rules, bending laws, believing she was beyond consequence. But in that moment, she realized she was. The neighbors whispered. Some laughed softly under their breath. Others just shook their heads. And I stood frozen, coffee mug still in hand, watching the empire Karen had built collapse in the span of 5 minutes. The inspectors read her rights as they led her toward the car. Cameras clicked. Videos captured every second. And all I could think was, this wasn't just justice, this was balance. Because when someone steals your letters, they're not just taking paper. They're taking your privacy, your family's words, your life. And no matter how powerful they think they are, no one gets to steal that forever. That morning, Karen wasn't the HOA president. She wasn't the queen of the cul-de-sac. She was just another criminal in handcuffs. And for the first time in years, nobody feared her anymore. The news spread faster than wildfire. By the time the patrol car pulled out of her driveway, half the neighborhood was buzzing. Windows cracked open. Curtains parted. Neighbors whispered to one another like kids trading secrets at recess. The woman who once strutted down the street in her robe like royalty was now shoved into the back of a squad car. For years, Karen had built her reign on fear. Fines for a lawn a half-inch too tall, threatening letters about trash bins, snide remarks about house paint not being up to standard. We lived under her microscope, walking on eggshells to avoid her wrath. And now, those same neighbors who trembled when she passed by were suddenly laughing, recording, shaking their heads. Her empire collapsed in a single morning. But for me, the moment felt heavier. Because this wasn't just about Karen. It was about everything she represented. Abuse of power, manipulation, control disguised as community standards. And as I stood there watching the flashing lights disappear into the distance, I realized something. Justice didn't always arrive quietly. Sometimes it came in the form of handcuffs clicking shut in broad daylight. Still, the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. A week later, Lopez called me. His voice was calm, professional, but behind it I could hear the weight of finality. "She's been indicted," he said. "Multiple counts of mail theft. It'll go federal." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Indicted, federal charges. These weren't just HOA squabbles anymore. This was prison time. The HOA board scrambled to distance themselves. At the very next meeting, the vote was unanimous. Karen was stripped of her title, expelled from her throne. The same board members who once bowed to her iron grip now avoided saying her name at all. They spoke in hushed tones, like children afraid of a ghost that might return if they said it too loud. And yet there was silence in the air, a strange silence. Without Karen's constant barking, the neighborhood felt lighter. The tension that used to hang between our houses dissolved. People lingered outside longer, waved to each other, smiled. It was like we were all remembering what it felt like to be neighbors again. Still, I couldn't shake the image of her face that day, the disbelief in her eyes, not guilt, not remorse, just shock. She'd spent so many years twisting the rules that she believed she was the rule, and watching her realize she was, it was haunting. But there was also a lesson hidden in it. Power built on fear is fragile. It looks strong. It feels unshakable. But the second it's tested, the second it meets real accountability, it crumbles. And when it crumbles, it doesn't just break quietly. It shatters. I thought back to all the moments she mocked us, all the violation slips, the late-night lectures about integrity. And I couldn't help but wonder, how many of us had stayed silent because we thought nothing could be done? How many of us had chosen fear instead of standing up? That thought stung, because it wasn't just Karen who let things get this far, it was all of us. Every time we stayed quiet, every time we told ourselves it's just the HOA, every time we laughed nervously instead of pushing back. But now, the silence was broken. I remember the day I walked down the street after her arrest. A neighbor stopped me, an older man whose house Karen had fined 3 times for unapproved garden gnomes. He looked me in the eye and said, "I can't believe you did it. You actually stood up to her." I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't some heroic act. It was desperation. It was the refusal to let someone reach into my life one more time. Yet maybe that's what bravery really is. Not grand gestures, not perfect speeches. Just refusing to stay silent when silence becomes unbearable. That night, sitting on my porch, I realized something else. Karen's downfall wasn't just her punishment. It was our freedom, the end of her control, the chance for the neighborhood to breathe again. But I also knew her story wasn't finished. Federal cases move slowly, trials drag out, appeals pile up. And somewhere behind the walls of a cell or an attorney's office, Karen was still scheming, still convincing herself she'd been wronged. Because people like Karen never see themselves as villains. They always believe they're the hero. The courthouse smelled like old wood and tension, polished benches, cold marble floors, the kind of silence that hums with unspoken judgment. I had never been inside one before, not like this. And yet there I was, heart pounding, palms clammy, waiting to watch the woman who once ruled my street face something bigger than an HOA hearing. Karen entered in a gray suit. No robe, no slippers, no pearls, just a sharp blazer that seemed desperate to project authority she no longer had. But even stripped of her title, she walked like she owned the room. Chin high, eyes darting, that same quiet arrogance that had kept us all in line for years. The judge called the case, United States versus Karen Miller. Hearing those words aloud felt surreal. This wasn't the HOA board. This wasn't a petty dispute about weeds or paint colors. This was federal law, and Karen, our self-appointed queen, was just another defendant standing at the mercy of something she couldn't control. The prosecutor laid it out in brutal detail. Evidence of tampered envelopes, GPS data from the sting, photos, videos, my testimony, neighbor testimony. Piece by piece, they built the case until it stood like a tower around her. Unshakable. I sat on the witness stand, pulse hammering, voice shaking as I told the story of that morning. The lavender robe, the stolen letter, the disbelief I felt. And every time I glanced at Karen, she looked back at me with that same icy stare, like I was the traitor, like I had broken the unspoken rule of never challenging her control. But the strangest part, she never showed remorse. When her attorney spoke, it wasn't about guilt. It was about excuses. She was protecting the neighborhood. She was monitoring suspicious activity. She was ensuring security. Lies wrapped in ribbons of justification. She twisted her theft into duty, her arrogance into sacrifice, and for a moment I almost wondered if she believed it herself. Then came the neighbors. One by one, they took the stand. The woman who never got her grandson's birthday card, the man fined for gnomes who discovered his overdue bills had been stolen, a young mother whose husband's tax documents vanished weeks before an audit. Each story wasn't just evidence, it was a wound, and each wound traced back to Karen. I'll never forget the way the courtroom felt as those voices piled up. Heavy, somber, it wasn't just about stolen paper anymore. It was about dignity, privacy, trust. When the final witness finished, the silence was deafening. The judge leaned forward, eyes cold. Mail theft is not a game. It is not a matter of personal control or convenience. It is a crime, and this court will treat it as such. Karen shifted in her chair. For the first time, her confidence cracked. The verdict came down like thunder, guilty, multiple counts. The sentence would follow in weeks. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, and part of me did. But another part of me felt something different, something heavier. Because watching Karen sit there, shoulders stiff, eyes wide, I realized she wasn't invincible after all. She was just human. Flawed, fragile, afraid. And in a strange way, that was harder to watch than her arrogance. Walking out of the courthouse, I looked at the neighbors gathered on the steps. They were smiling, relieved, even laughing softly. But behind the joy was something else, a kind of quiet reflection. Because deep down, we all knew it could have gone differently if I hadn't spoken up, if the inspectors hadn't believed me, if Karen had been just a little more careful. Sometimes justice hangs on threads thinner than a letter in the wind. That night I sat on my porch again. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, but I couldn't shake the image of Karen's face as the verdict was read. It wasn't anger, it wasn't shame, it was disbelief, like she still thought the rules couldn't touch her. And maybe that's the cruelest truth of all. People who live for control rarely recognize when it's gone. The sentencing day arrived with a sky as gray as her suit. Clouds hung low, heavy, like they knew judgment was coming. The courthouse steps were quieter this time, fewer cameras, fewer whispers. But for those of us who lived under Karen's reign, it felt monumental. This was the day we'd finally hear how her story would end. Inside, the air was tense. Karen sat at the defense table, her posture straighter than ever, as if she could still will herself into authority. Her lawyer whispered in her ear, but she barely blinked. Her chin stayed high. Her pearl earrings were gone, but the arrogance clung to her like perfume. The judge entered, robe sweeping, eyes sharp. Silence fell. The clerk read her charges once again, multiple counts of mail theft, tampering, and interference with federal delivery. The words echoed like hammer strikes. Then came Karen's chance to speak. She rose slowly, smoothing her blazer, and faced the court. "I was never a criminal," she began, her voice firm, quivering only slightly. "I did what I thought was right for this community. I made sacrifices others weren't willing to make. And yes, I took mail, but I did it because I cared, because I wanted to protect us from threats." Her words landed like stones in a pond, heavy, hollow. A few gasps rippled through the benches. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't accepting fault. She was rewriting the narrative one last time, as if her delusion could erase reality. The judge let her finish, then leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Miller, you call it protection. This court calls it theft. You call it sacrifice. This court calls it violation. What you did was not noble. It was criminal. And today you will face the consequences." The gavel struck once. The sentence, 18 months in federal prison. Probation to follow, fines, restrictions. Karen's face barely moved. Her jaw clenched, but her eyes stayed cold, detached, like she was still holding onto the illusion that this was beneath her. But for the first time, she couldn't spin it. She couldn't twist the narrative. The law had spoken. As she was led away, cuffs around her wrists again, I felt something shift inside me. Relief, yes, justice, absolutely, but also pity. Because for all her arrogance, all her cruelty, Karen was small now, just another inmate number waiting to be filed away. Walking out of the courthouse, neighbors gathered again. Some hugged me, some clapped my back, others just whispered, "It's finally over." For the first time in years, people didn't sound afraid. They sounded free. That evening, our street was different. Children played outside longer. Couples sat on porches, chatting without glancing nervously at their lawns or their driveways. The air felt lighter, as if someone had lifted a weight off our shoulders. But inside me, something else stirred, a quiet reflection. Because Karen's downfall wasn't just about stolen letters. It was about the way power corrupts when left unchecked, about how easy it is for someone to slip from leader to tyrant, and about how long people will suffer in silence until one person decides enough is enough. I thought about all those years we gave her power, all the times we stayed quiet, hoping she'd lose interest, all the times we whispered instead of shouting, and I realized we had created her. We had allowed her to grow untouchable. And that was the hardest truth of all. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about facing our own silence. That night, as the crickets sang and porch lights flickered on, I sat with my coffee and thought about her. About the lavender robe. About the way she strutted down my driveway that morning. About the disbelief in her eyes as the cuffs closed. And I whispered to myself, not in anger but in resolve, never again. Life after Karen felt strange at first, almost too quiet. For years, her presence had been everywhere, lurking in violation slips, echoing in her clipped tone at meetings, hovering over every decision like a storm cloud. And suddenly, she was gone. No lavender robe drifting down the sidewalks, no smug laughter at board meetings, no fines taped to doors, just silence. But silence, I discovered, can be healing. Neighbors who once avoided each other started talking again. People who used to rush their trash, cans inside the second the truck passed, now lingered outside, chatting, laughing, trading stories. Children rode bikes down the street without parents worrying about noise complaints. Gardens sprouted flowers instead of fines. The street began to feel like a neighborhood again, not a kingdom under siege. The HOA board, desperate to recover its image, scrambled to repair the damage. They held emergency elections, this time promising transparency. Real transparency. No more secret votes. No more arbitrary rulings. For the first time in years, homeowners actually showed up to meetings, not out of fear but curiosity. Hope. I remember walking into that first meeting after Karen was expelled. The room felt different, lighter. People weren't hunched over, bracing for scolding. They sat upright, speaking freely, voices carrying without hesitation. Someone even cracked a joke about male security, and the room erupted in laughter, real laughter, the kind that doesn't hide behind nervous glances. It was then I realized something. Karen's downfall didn't just remove a tyrant. It reminded us of our own power. For years, we let her dictate everything because it was easier, because it was safer, because we convinced ourselves she couldn't be stopped. But now, with her gone, we remembered the truth. The HOA was never hers, it was ours. And yet there were scars. Every now and then, I'd catch myself glancing out the window at sunrise, expecting to see that lavender robe drifting toward my mailbox. Sometimes, when the mail ran late, my stomach tightened, old paranoia creeping back. Trauma has a way of lingering, even after the threat is gone. But healing came in small moments. Like when Mrs. Thompson, the woman who never got her grandson's birthday card, received a new one in the mail and cried on her porch while reading it. Or when the man with the gnomes proudly displayed a whole line of them across his yard, daring anyone to say a word. Or when the young mother whose tax forms had vanished finally sat on her porch, smiling, no longer looking over her shoulder. Each moment was a piece of the neighborhood stitching itself back together. One evening I stood at the end of my driveway sipping coffee and looked around. Kids chasing fireflies, couples chatting on porches. The kind of simple, ordinary peace we had all forgotten we deserved. And I thought, maybe this is what justice really looks like, not just a guilty verdict, not just a sentence, but the quiet return of freedom. Karen's house sat empty, the windows dark, the once manicured lawn growing shaggy as if even the grass had been waiting for her to leave. Neighbors whispered about what would happen to it. Some said foreclosure. Others said she'd sell it from prison. But no one feared it anymore. It was just a house now, not a throne. And in that emptiness, there was a lesson. People like Karen thrive on the illusion of power. They convince others they're untouchable, indispensable. But when the mask is ripped away, what remains? Just a person, just a house, just silence. As I turned back toward my door that night, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not perfect peace, not permanent, but enough. Enough to breathe without fear, enough to live without checking over my shoulder. The neighborhood was healing, and so was I. Sometimes I still think about that morning. The steam rising from my coffee, the pale light of dawn, the lavender robe drifting down my driveway. It plays in my mind like a scene from a movie I can't pause, one small act that unraveled everything. It's strange, isn't it? How something so ordinary, a letter, a mailbox, can carry so much weight. We don't think about it, we take it for granted. But those envelopes, they're more than paper. They're lifelines, words from family, promises from loved ones, pieces of our lives tucked into tiny rectangles, and Karen thought she could take them without consequence. But consequence has a way of finding us. When I walk the neighborhood now, I see it differently. I see freedom where fear once lived. I see laughter where silence once smothered us. And I see the truth Karen refused to face. No crown is strong enough to stop karma when it comes collecting. Because in the end, it wasn't me who brought her down. It wasn't even the inspectors. It was her greed, her arrogance, her belief that she was untouchable. She built her own downfall one stolen envelope at a time until the weight of them all finally crushed her. And that's the thing about power. It doesn't disappear overnight. It seeps into people, convinces them they're above everyone else. But the higher they climb on that illusion, the harder they fall when the truth finally drags them back down. Karen never understood that. She thought rules were for other people, that her title, her pearls, her smug laughter would shield her forever. But the cuffs told a different story. And when the gavel struck, it wasn't just her sentence, it was the sound of an empire collapsing. I wish I could say I hated her, that I celebrated every second of her downfall. But the truth is more complicated. Watching her led away, watching her house sit empty, watching her name whispered with pity instead of fear, I didn't feel hate. I felt sadness. Sadness that someone so desperate for control ended up with none. Sadness that a community lost years to silence before it finally found its voice. Sadness that it took federal charges for us to realize we were stronger than we ever believed. But maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who roar the loudest. They're the ones who endure, who stay quiet until the moment comes when silence is no longer an option. And when they finally speak, the world listens. Looking back, I realize it wasn't just about stolen mail. It was about dignity, about drawing a line and saying enough. And once that line was drawn, everything changed. Karen's story is a cautionary tale now. Neighbors whisper it to newcomers, shaking their heads, warning them about what happens when someone confuses power with ownership. Her name is no longer spoken with fear. It's spoken with disbelief, with a lesson attached. And for me, I learned that sometimes justice doesn't arrive when you want it. It arrives when it must. It arrives when you're ready to hold on, even if your hands are shaking. Because justice doesn't need you to be fearless. It just needs you to refuse to quit. So when I pass my mailbox now, I don't see it as a box of bills and letters. I see it as a reminder. A reminder that no one, no matter their title, their arrogance, their robe, or their pearls, is above the law, and no one is above karma. Karen thought she owned the neighborhood, but in the end she owned nothing, not the street, not the people, not even her freedom. And that's the final truth. When you build your power on fear, you don't just risk losing it. You guarantee it. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.